go into the year and start selecting. In that case, a lot of times we'll start sampling, randomly sample if we're going into the year. For year end, we try to get that coverage of 75 to 80% of that total dollar amount. So that tells you when you look at 4 entries totaling 5,400, we got a lot of coverage in the other 12 entries that we looked at. Specifically, the one up above you can see is 126, and they go up from there. So we try to get as much coverage as we can. I know with these 4 entries, those were ones that resulted throughout the year. And that kind of gets triggered by that bank reconciliation recommendation we already had. When we notice that bank reconciliations, we can't tell if necessarily they're being reviewed independently. We may go in and start looking at journal entries revolving, around that bank reconciliation process.
So when you do your random sampling, what proportion of the total number of entries, is it like every 100th one or?
10%.
It's usually around the 10%. We have a sheet that tells us where we say what's your tolerable misstatement, which means how much are you willing, what percentage are you willing to miss, and usually we want a 90. I think our office is a 93.5% is how much assurance we want when we're reviewing something.
Okay.
And then we put in the number of entries, the total population, and it tells us how many to test, but it's usually roughly around 10%.
And you have notes for what you actually did that's more detailed than what you're presenting to us right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilman Major?
Yes, so just want to ask, with regard to these journal entries, again, those journal entries would have been made roughly contemporaneously, therefore in 17 or the very early month or two of 18, is that right?
Yeah, they would have been definitely in 17, and they would have been right around that same time as those bank reconciliations, because this was part of that process, was the journal entry.
Yes, therefore just pointing out again, this is prior to our current finance director joining us. I just want to ask that with regard to the $126,000 item, just to be clear, that didn't involve a cash account, is that correct?
I don't recall if it involved cash. We can say it was an allowable expenditure, otherwise we would have, or allowable journal entry that was valid. Otherwise we would have stayed that here. We just could not we could not verify it was independently reviewed.
Got it, thank you. With respect to the 5,500 roughly, 5,477, is it possible that is $5,477 that left our bank accounts? Do we know whether or not that potentially just be cash that's now gone?
Hard to say on that one. We reconcile ending cash to your county treasurer's statements, and we have to reconcile cash on your county treasurer's statement or to bank statements within a certain dollar amount. I believe it's $100, and we were able to do that. But then again, if the same person is in charge of doing bank reconciliations, writing warrants, also making the financial statements, they could conceivably, misappropriate. So that's why it's really important to have those segregation of duties. And some of these recommendations are geared around that, of having independence around bank reconciliations, financial statement preparation, journal entries. So that way it stops somebody from being able to do that. In this case, we didn't see evidence that it was misappropriation. We looked into it further, but nobody can say without a shadow of a doubt, I guess, because we don't look at every single transaction and we don't dig into that detail.
Well, we didn't have the support for it, so we don't know.
Well, I'm trying to understand the answer. So if you don't have support, how would you know that it doesn't just represent money that's gone?
Right. So it depends on if the journal entry is decreasing the general ledger to match the bank statement, in which case that might not necessarily be cash leaving the bank. It could just be a missed entry into your accounting system, versus the other way, if it was the cash in your bank was less than your general ledger, then that could be cash
Right,
going out.
so that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
So we can't answer that without seeing the support. So this is $5,477 in entries that we don't know what their purpose was for them.
And you guys don't know if it's a debit or credit?
We do have the entries, we have that in our audit work papers, I believe, so we could provide that to you.
Well, it'd just be nice to know if it's 5,500.
Which way it's going.
Yeah, it's 5,500 that's
Was donated, we forgot to record it. Or?
that, yes.
Yeah, we can.
No, it'd be nice to know.
In most cases, it is something that a reconciling item that just is hard to identify. A lot of times it can be from years ago or months ago. It's hard to say how long that's been going on, and it's just a plugged figure to get them to match because they couldn't figure out how to reconcile it, or at some time the person wasn't knowledgeable enough to know how to reconcile it, and it's just continued
Right.
since that date.
So we
it's-
can look at our audit work papers and clarify the direction that it's going,
Yeah,
which
no,
is what you're asking. Yeah.
I'm not making an accusation, I'm just
Oh.
trying to get to the
Mhm.
bottom of it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Well,
On the 126,000 journal entry, that says we didn't retain the original copy. And maybe I'm thinking like a lawyer, original and
Yeah.
copy are usually two. So are you saying we didn't have any documentation, or we just had a copy and we didn't have the original?
Yeah, that's right.
So we were able to obtain the documentation, but the documentation didn't show evidence that was reviewed. So that's what the recommendation for this first bullet is geared around, is just making sure that journal entries are independently reviewed.
Okay, so there was documentation, just.
That's how we did, yeah, and that's how we determined it was a valid journal entry.
Okay.
I just want to make another note on this case. Part of the Clark-Newberg recommendations that we've already implemented was adding another accountant to the staff, and we appreciate council's approval of that. That makes sure that we don't have a lot of these tasks just assigned to one person. Now we have at least two people that can handle it, so you can separate the duties better.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, I would like you to return to your exit agenda again. So the next item in the agenda is the communication required by audit standards. So by required by audit standards, we are required to let you know that during our audit, or in relation to our financial statement audit report, we would like to bring to your attention that there were no uncorrected misstatement in the audited financial statements, and there were no material misstatements in the financial statement that corrected by management during the audit, which results a modified opinion. Any questions with that?
I don't understand.
So we're required under auditing standards to let you know after completing our audit if there were any remaining items that are small in nature that remain uncorrected. Maybe there just wasn't enough time to accurately complete those.
Mhm.
We did not find any items that remained uncorrected. Everything that came up during the audit process, the city staff went in and did the appropriate corrections, which is great. And it's a bit unusual. We usually have some small unremaining corrections that
Okay.
remain outstanding. And we're also required to let you know if there were any large items that were corrected during the course of audit work. There were none. If there were, we'd be discussing them further in the audit report.
Okay.
So,
Any questions? Any other questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I would pass to Alex for the rest of the items.
I'll be
in
going
the
over,
agenda.
thank you. I'll be going over finalizing your audit report. As Christina mentioned, we'll be publishing the audit report by the end of the year. Usually that takes a week or two to get that out, but you'll get an email notification as soon as that is published, as long as you're subscribed to our service. Management rep letter. Typically we provide a management representation letter with this packet. We're actually obtaining it today from management. It's just a bunch of disclosures from management saying that they've adhered to certain rules, regulations, standards, and that they're not aware of any instances that they have not communicated to us that would be against those rules, regulations, or standards. Audit costs. At the beginning of the audit, we estimated the cost to be $12,600. Actual audit costs will approximate that amount. I actually think we'll be slightly underneath that amount, probably around $12,000. Next scheduled audit will be significantly larger. It sounds like the accountability audit will be covering 2 years as opposed to your normal 1 year in the past. And then of course, we'll be doing that financial statement audit as well. As a result, the estimated cost of that will be $42,000 plus other expenses of $5,000, which is usually travel hours, travel expenses. Part of that is we did raise our rates slightly going into 2019. We raised it $5 an hour for our regular billing, and our travel went up about $30 an hour because we used to bill at half rate, now we'll bill at 75% rate for that. Any questions on those audit costs or scope for next year's audit?
How does that compare to last year's audit? Or for 2016 that you did in 2017?
Sure, I don't have the exact figures in front of me today, but when we do postpone an audit to a 2-year period, there is a little bit of a cost savings in number of hours. Unfortunately, we had a billing rate increase that's going through on January 1st, so that cost savings is going to kind of bring it back up to what it would normally be if you were to pay for an individual annual audit. But hours wise, it is less than if you were to have separate annual audits for your accountability audit.
Okay.
And can I ask a question too?
Sure.
I kind of know the answer to this, but
Yep.
I'm gonna ask. And the more hotline complaints, the higher the audit cost, correct?
It really depends. We are required to review all hotline concerns that come in and ascertain the effect that it could have on the city's audit. Depending on the nature of the concerns, it is possible that they might not be included in the audit, but it depends on what the specific concerns are and how many are provided. So our goal would be to communicate those so that you're aware. At this moment in time, we do have one open hotline for the next year's audit, and we'll keep you updated if there's any changes to that.
I guess that was my question too, or wanted to clarify, a hotline request might cost the city more money in an audit, but that's not due to the fact that of a negative finding, it's just purely due to the fact that it requires more time for you to review even if it's unfounded, correct?
It depends. We do our best to absorb it within the accountability budget that we're already planning. Depending on the nature and the number of concerns, it's possible that there could be an increase in budget cost if there's more.
It would also depend on the other risks identified as part of our normal accountability audit.
Yeah, we had a number of unusual ones in June 2016, as I recall, which caused a cost increase, but are you saying there's only one so far for 2017?
There's one concern submitted, but the number of specific concerns within that one hotline referral, we're still working out. So we don't have that information yet.
That's for 2018 or 2017?
It will apply to your next accountability audit. Yeah.
So there's nothing from last year that's still on?
No,
there?
it came in after the conclusion of our audit.
Okay, thank you.
Or near the end, right before the exit.
And do we know in advance what the hotline issue is? I mean, do you ask information that we provide, or?
Yes, we do our best to share the nature of the concerns with the city when we have them, and if possible, we might try to do some interim work. We're still working with the citizen to understand the concerns a little bit better so that we can determine if it's within our authority and within our scope to cover during the next audit. Under the state law, the Citizen Hotline Referral Program, the name is kept confidential until the results of our audit are complete and the hotline is closed. But the concerns or the nature of the concerns, once those become aware to us, we will do our best to communicate those to the city.
So after the audit is done, then we will be informed who the citizen was. So you're saying?
Yeah, should you do a public records request or ask for that information, yes, it is a public record.
Okay, thank you.
And we will also provide the city, as we did with the 16 audit, a copy of the results from any review performed as well.
This states here that the audit will be conducted in summer of 2019. That will be late summer of 2019, possibly even early fall. We'll work with the city on scheduling that. It just depends on our other audits. I just know for North King County, looking at our schedule next year, it's looking like the latter part of summer, just so you know, early fall.
And then depending on if the city does obtain financial or federal grants, if you obtain federal grants and expend over $750,000 in federal grant funds in one calendar year, that will trigger a third audit. That's a federal grant compliance audit, and that's due by the end of September every year. So please let us know if the city is looking to get or receives substantial amounts of federal grant funds.
So we always send out an audit survey with our audit report that goes out to the usually senior accountant and finance director in this case. We always appreciate your feedback. Anything that worked well, anything you'd like us to see continue doing, or anything that you'd like to see improvement on, we always do look at those very closely. We really appreciate your feedback if you fill that out. Also, a few resources for you, local government support team. If you go out to your client portal, there's lots of resources there the city can use. There's trainings, there's comparative statistics, there's tools. They're always coming out with new material, always coming out with new trainings. If you're curious about a GASB coming out, something like that sort, they usually have that training out there for you. So I encourage you to use that. There's also the Performance Center, which is another area for local governments to go for things of training, tools, resources, other trainings coming up. And so I really encourage you to use those resources. There's always the Auditor Help Desk as well. So if you have any questions in the interim period, that's a great resource to use. Or you can reach out to us directly, and we're always happy to answer your questions if we can. So with that, any questions about any of the material we presented here today? I know it's a lot of material, so. Perfect.
So all in all, I think I can say it's a good audit.
Yes, the financial statement audit was a clean opinion, which is what you always want. Everybody was very accommodating, and it was a good audit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no further questions? Thank you.
I'd just like to acknowledge to council that Jerry did a very good job working with the auditors, and we appreciate his contributions.
I would second that as well.
And Drew did some help too on the side. Because he applied for it.
All right, thank you all for your
Thank you.
time today.
Thank you.